Anti-Corruption and Transparency Group, SERAP, has issued a one-week ultimatum to all 36 governors and the FCT minister to account for the agreements and spending details of some 5.9 trillion naira and $4.6 billion loans. SERAP's request also includes details and locations of projects executed with the loans. The group called on the governors and the FCT minister to invite the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission and Anti-Graft Agency, EFCC, to investigate the spending of loans obtained by their states. SERAP's request follows the disclosure by Kaduna State Governor Uba Sani that his predecessor, Nasir El-Rufai, left huge debts amounting to $587 million and 85 billion naira, making it impossible for the state to pay salaries. Joining us now on the morning show is Achike Chude, a human rights activist and deputy chairman, Joint Action Front. Good morning, Achike Chude. Good to see you on the morning show.
Yeah, good morning. It's a pleasure, as usual.
Well, very quickly, SERAP, the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, is asking the state governors to account for monies that they collected, either as loans or as allocations, and what they did with the money, either in terms of projects or other infrastructure. And SERAP is giving 1 week ultimatum. Do you think that that is realistic? SERAP is even asking the state governors and the minister of the FCT to call ICPC and EFCC to come and audit, state accounts. Is that the way these things go in Nigeria? Or SERAP is just trying to create some awareness, or it will probably, as that body usually does, end up going to court to seek an order of mandamus. What do you think, Achike Chude?
Yeah, I think your question really about how realistic it is, I think is key, is fundamental. Obviously, you ask yourself, there are certain things that SERAP knows that some of us Nigerians also know, and that is the state of our democracy. It would appear that our democracy continues to whittle down every single day. Because you are talking about reality and talking about ideals, a difference between ideals and practicability, of what SERAP is talking about. So sometimes you want to feel a bit sorry for SERAP and for civil society, credible civil society organizations in the country about the almost impotent situation that they find themselves in. That is trying to get the politicians to do what they are supposed to do under our constitutions, because there are enough laws in this country that should compel the politicians to work in tandem with the ideals of a democracy. The issue of accountability that SERAP is talking about is not it's not science. It's something that's enshrined in the various laws, that have to do with accountability of government, expenditure and revenues. Of course, you're talking about not just constitutional provisions like SERAP also referenced, but you're talking about the Fiscal Responsibility Act. You're talking about the Bureau for Public Procurement, the Public Procurement Act, and there are some other such laws that under normal circumstances should ensure that government officials, whenever they are acting on behalf of the people, using government resources to fulfill certain ends, must be accountable and must do it in a transparent manner. The laws are there, but unfortunately, they are being obeyed in the breach. And so SERAP finds itself, what do we want SERAP to do? But to also continue to push the frontiers of our laws in this country, to issue this, statement, which, if you look at it in terms of the trajectory, our political trajectory to, from 1999 till this moment, you would say, well, that the politicians will look at SERAP's threat and then just generally fall over themselves in laughter, and derision, because obviously, what are you going to do? What is SERAP going to do? What will Nigerians do if the politicians do not respond to the SERAP threat? Of course, it's like the the statement by Joseph Stalin with regards to the Pope. How many divisions has the Pope? What can he do? He only has a moral, the force of a moral suasion, but beyond that, there is nothing he can do about that. And I think that, unfortunately, sadly, we find ourselves in that situation. But then again, we have to continue to agitate. We have to continue to advocate. That's the only thing we can do now. The politicians are not going to respond to anything. And that gives you an idea of the state of our polity, that 36 state governors, and then the person in charge of the Federal Capital Territory, that you have to tell them, you have to try to threaten them, you know, using the legal instrument to try to get them to do what, under normal circumstances, credible, responsible, committed politicians should be doing. So it's a good thing by SERAP, but it is more of idealism to expect that the political class will respond to this. And going to court is just one other area. So there are those that will tell you that the court is under their terms, that they control the courts, what happens in the court and all of that, allegedly anyway. So I don't see anything coming out of it unless the people themselves will have to decide. This is Nigerians ultimately, because we have been told that democracy, that we have to pay, the price we have to pay for democracy is vigilance. And vigilance means constructive engagement by the people generally with their political leaders and with their polity. So we have not got to that level where we engage constructively, and that's why this thing continues to go on the way it has gone on in the country.
Wow. Well, Mr. Chude, you paint such a dire picture, almost hopeless situation in terms of the outcome of this pursuit by SERAP. And I was tempted to ask you then, okay, how do we prevent this? Because if you're saying that it almost seems as if the governors are not accountable to anyone, especially in terms of the financials, then what do we do? But then you also cite the legislature, the act's provisions to ensure that this kind of situation doesn't happen. Where do we then go from here? If a call for accountability would not be heeded to, like you said, the laughing division, if we have acts and legislature, which is not, and institutions which are meant to, check these excesses, not doing their duties, not doing their jobs, where do we go from here? Because at the end of the day, we have to still speak up for the people. This is the commonwealth of the people, especially when these loans are taken and there's no obvious judicious use of these loans, then it becomes a big challenge. If we look at the DMO's office and the recent reports, we see states like Benue, states like Ondo, states like Ekiti, with loans that are in hundreds of billions of naira, millions of naira, yet we can't see what these monies have been used for. Where do we then go from here? Because this is a big question. People are excited, oh, SERAP is speaking up for the common man, holding government to account, but if you're saying that they wouldn't even respond to these calls and then we pursue the legal channel and we're not very optimistic about that, what do we then do to protect the interests of the people? What options are available?
Look, one word that has been prevalent in this country since 1999 has been the word impunity. So all of the things I have said, have revolved around that word impunity. Everybody knows, even the media, you keep on talking about the culture of impunity in this country. And it is impunity that has brought about this situation, this sorry situation. So my statements are rooted in facts and reality. It is not about, wanting to make a dire prediction about the helplessness of the Nigerian, of Nigerians in the presence of, their political leadership that have not shown any serious sense of responsibility and commitment to the nation state. So these are just the issues. Look, where do we go from there? What do we do? I agree. First of all, what SERAP is doing is the right thing. But again, we are looking at the reality of the situation on ground. Now, we fail to realize the fact that you are talking about power. You are talking about, balance of power. The balance of power is in the hands essentially of the politicians and the political class. So they represent a force. They represent a force. And they represent a force right now, an immovable force. But it has to be moved. It has to be moved. And the only way you can move the political class is through another force. And it is not, I'm not talking about forces, forces that are illegal or beyond, constitutional provisions and beyond the rule of law. I'm talking about because the people themselves, the Nigerian people themselves, constitute a major force, the greatest force that are able to move the politicians. It is why the politicians, during elections, they go to the people. It's why they go to the people during elections, And so we need to be able to mobilize. If we are not able to mobilize the right kind of resources, especially the human resources, with regards to mobilizing Nigerians, for political action, it is going to be very difficult, practically impossible, to move the politicians, to put the sufficient level of, pressure on the politicians to begin to move them in the right direction. It is not as if they are not aware that what they are doing is wrong. It is not as if they are not aware that they have been getting away with blue murder against, in terms of what they have done within the system. But the ability to get away with this has been dependent on the fact that they constitute a force that is not beholden to the Nigerian people, because Nigerian people have not been able to, muster that force that is needed, politically, to be able to move them or to get them to move in their proper direction. And so that's what we need. Ultimately, it is back to the people, because, organizations like SERAP are just doing what they can do within the ambits of whatever laws that sets them up. They cannot go beyond that. But whatever they do, whatever SERAP does, is they are making a statement for the Nigerian people, so that the Nigerian people should take note and, in the fullness of time, be able to do something about the information that they have. So SERAP is giving information to the Nigerian people, just like the journalists, the media has been doing all of this while. And so there is a struggle to be fought in this country. If we don't do that, then we are going to go downhill. And it's not too far to look at what happened with countries like Somalia, Egypt under Hosni Mubarak, and then the man in Sudan who was there for 25 years. And they were there for as long as the people were passive, for as long as the people were docile. But when it got to a period where the people were able to mobilize themselves, they constituted a force that was greater than the force that was on display in those countries, and they were able to move them out. Unfortunately, we have seen how, the fallout, we have seen the fallout in those places, and how those countries degenerated to a level, especially in a place like Somalia. We must not allow it to get to that level. So it's sad, it's unfortunate, but that's where we are. I have always maintained that our political leaders are not patriotic, and they are not nationalistic, they are not committed to the Nigerian state. It's as simple as that. There's not all the shenanigans that we have seen in this country in the past, how many years. Not just this administration, the previous administration, other administrations. Though it has gotten worse with each succeeding administration in the country, all of these things have been as a result of the primary disposition of the political elites towards the country. Nigeria is seen, and no wonder, of course, the statement by Kameya that Nigeria is a criminally run corporation where the leaders are armed and are hidden in the safe. When you look at it, it's an unfortunate statement. But by the time you look deep, at that statement, you realize that, everything he said is actually true.
But that's the sad reality. So the question now is, yes, SERAP has done a lot, but how do we now hold them responsible? In a country where a senator yesterday was asked about a pertinent question about a budget, and the senator went on by saying, I don't want to be caught up, I don't want to enter Wahala. As regards budgets that a lot of people have argued that were really padded, a lot of projects with no location. How can you have a project with no location and you have monetary items appropriated to all of those projects? So, number one, how much can we do as regards, yes, SERAP asking these people to account? Secondly, what can also the people do? Thirdly, what can also the constituents in these states do? Because in the end, this debt, the constituents in the state will suffer it. Look at Kaduna, for instance. If the governor had not come out to talk, that's how a sizable portion of the FAC allocation to the state is being used to pay debt. Today, what was the money even used for in the first place? We can account for. So, is there sort of like, apart from the State House of Assembly, which I know they're already in the pockets of the governors, can there be a true people's parliament? I don't know, because I'm lost, I'm confused, I'm bereft of ideas as we speak.
You're not the only one that's looking at the situation helplessly and with despair. A lot of Nigerians. But if the former president, under whose administration a lot of atrocities were also committed, if you could say in 2021, as the president of this country, the executive president of this country with the enormous powers available to him, if you could say that that once local government funds are released, the governor collects 100 million goes to the state governor. The state governor takes 50 million, sends 50 to the chairman of the local government, and then he decides what he will do with it, give a few people, and then pockets the rest. If he could say so with so much helplessness and anger, then what are we supposed to say? This is an executive president in the country that had powers and that has information at his disposal that these things are happening, and yet he felt so helpless. So we're in a helpless situation, but I do not think that we should just fold our arms and wait for salvation. That salvation has to come from the people, because ultimately governance is about the people. And that's why I was making reference to the fact that when it comes to election time, the politicians know that, well, they have to go and they give their report card to the people. Even though we also know that they try to manipulate that process so that the voices of the people are never heard. And then they go to the courts, and then the same manipulation continues, and we're back to square one. And they are not looking, because they are so myopic and short-sighted that they are not looking at the future. Because the question you should ask yourself is, for how long will this thing continue? Look, this misgovernance started a long time ago until it led to insurgency in the north, the Boko Haram. And they continued, and then the bandits joined, and then others. And then you now had, insurgency activities in the southeast and other parts of the country, violence everywhere. Everything that is happening is down to bad governance. And everything we see about bad governance is down to the political elites. And everything we see about the misbehavior of the political elites is down to the passivity and docility of the Nigerian people. Because ultimately, the Nigerian people are the greatest beneficiaries of good governance, and they are the greatest losers of a bad, as a result of bad governance. And so the people themselves, and I think the issue really is this. What SERAP is doing is good, and other society organization. We need more education. We need to conscientize the people much more than we are doing, on a scale that we have never done before. We need to open their eyes so that they can see where the problem is. Because you see, the reality is that if it doesn't happen, we are not able to do these things and to conscientize the people sufficiently to begin to politically engage with the polity. Then the danger is that we are going to allow hunger to determine the direction that the Nigerian people are going to go. And I've always maintained that the day it gets to a level where being alive and being dead is no longer, that people can no longer see the difference. Nigerians can no longer see the difference between being alive and being dead. It is at that moment that they will realize that we just have to do something. We might get something to change, but if we do nothing, we surely die. So the certainty, becomes more dangerous than the uncertainty of not doing anything. And that will push them, that will propel them. And I think that we are getting to that level. The hunger is not yet deep. Yes, there's hunger and suffering everywhere. But I think that will push people. But for us and the civil society, we need to continue to galvanize our people as much as we can. Because these politicians, it's like, look, let me just give this final analogy. The politician is like the driver who is driving a car, the Nigerian politician, that is heading fast towards a cliff. And he knows that will cause problem for him. He could die in the process. But he is so, used to what he's doing that he cannot even afford to match that brake. And then he gets to the cliff and falls over. That's what the politicians are doing, because there should be a political consensus. There should be an elitist bargaining, elitist consensus that what we have done, looking at the way the country has run over the years and where the country is, they must be able to sit down and say, look, these things we have done to this country, we've done it for far too long, and that this country can no longer afford to sustain it, and that all of us are in danger. But the level of their responsibility and the I don't care attitude is such that even though they see destruction approaching, they will do nothing about it. And that is a sad reality about the Nigerian state. But we, the people, should not allow that to happen.
Okay, Achike, we the people. For a while, the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation publishes monthly allocations given to governors and local councils or the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation gives us a summary of FAC allocations. Are you really sure that the ordinary Nigerian, the people, we the people, do you think we're really interested in asking questions from our leaders about how they spend the common patrimony? I give you an example of what happened in Kaduna State. Uba Sani, the governor, at a town hall meeting, the state of Kaduna State, reported, which is the background to this conversation, reported that, look, the state is so overburdened with debt that to pay monthly salaries is a problem going forward. Now, the only response he got was the son of the former governor abusing him, telling him that he's trying to make excuses for his incompetence and that he and his aides should just focus on governance and stop talking about debt. And this did not generate any outrage from the people of Kaduna State. They just moved on. So these same people we are talking about, is it that they are so, frustrated with the reality that confronts them, or that the people just don't care? They just see government as a place where, well, when you get there, you are governor. After all, one governor once told them that government money in government house, why should anybody complain? In the hands of the governor, why should you complain? So how did we get to that point?
Yeah, the father has a reputation, the son has a reputation. And it's unfortunate that this level of this kind of talk that should attract a lot of opprobrium from the entire citizens of Kaduna State is being met with stoic silence in some quarters. Because what did the governor say? The governor was talking about a fact. This is the situation, this is what I have met on ground. And then somebody who should be hiding his head in shame and asking the father what happened. How did you manage to leave this debt?
Well, okay, we lost the audio connection with Achike Chude in our Abuja studio, but we'd like to thank you very much, Achike Chude, for joining us on the morning.